Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to another narrated Pokemon X and Y Wi-Fi battle video. Today's battle is against an opponent by the name of BLTZ, which I'm just going to refer to as Blitz basically for the rest of the battle, and it happened on my stream the other day and was a ton of fun and an incredibly close and exciting match for everyone that was there watching, so I figured I had to upload it. Anyway, just to talk about my team a bit, I am using a dual priority Shiftry with Fake Out and Sucker Punch, as well as Seed Bomb and Knockoff for the ability to obviously get rid of items and stuff like that. I'm running a defensive Weezing, a defensive Slow King, a Toxic Boost Zangoose, a defensive Hitmontop, and then a Life Orbed Jolteon, whereas my opponent decided to bring a Mega Charizard X, a Zapdos, an Amoonguss, a Weavile, a Goodra, and also a defensive Crocodile, which is something that I've actually been seeing more and more of recently, which I think is very cool. But because this battle is a little bit longer than normal, I'm going to just jump into things right now so we can get started. So to start things off, I'm going to lead off with my Shiftry as my opponent leads off with his Crocodile. Now this is, as I said, a Fake Out, Sucker Punch, kind of weird priority Shiftry, but my opponent has the Crocodile with Intimidate, so my physical attacks as he switches out, obviously fearing the Grass type move, are not really going to be doing much damage to this Amoonguss. So I do the Fake Out, it really doesn't do much, but then I go for the Knockoff on the following turn, which is really great because I get to get rid of its Black Sludge as my opponent actually goes for the Spore, possibly expecting me to switch out. I really didn't have a reason to, especially because this Shiftry is actually sashed, so I decide to go out to my Slow King right here to take whatever attack that this Amoonguss wants to go for. I know I can take it all day, even though it does have the stab grass moves, but I do have much greater special defense than this Amoonguss has, and I also pack the Fire Blast, which you saw right there as my opponent actually switched out into Goodra. Now unfortunately for me, as my opponent reveals Thunderbolt, which is going to do super effective damage, I miss my Toxic on this turn, which does cause a bit of trouble later on in the battle because I would have loved to have worn down this Goodra a lot easier. But because I can actually take these Thunderbolts pretty well, I'm actually very safe to stay in here right now and just go for the Slack Off as my opponent switches out into his Weavile. Now unfortunately, I was actually terrified of Pursuit right there, but thankfully he doesn't have it, which he reveals right here because he didn't go for it. Goes for the Fake Out instead, reveals to me that it is actually a Life Orbed variant, but I go into my Hitmontop, get off the Intimidate, and don't really take much damage from that at all, which is really great for me. So I see this as a perfect opportunity to go for the High Jump Kick, but unfortunately I miss, which is very sucky for me because I lose half of my health in the process, which wouldn't have even done that much damage as you see right here to this Amoonguss, but I stayed in right here because I was hoping my opponent would actually put my Hitmontop to sleep. Now that I don't really need it to do damage, I just more or less need this Hitmontop for the Intimidate, but my opponent actually decides to go for the Stun Spore instead, which pretty much reveals to me his entire set, which is really great because now I have all that information. But now since my Hitmontop is paralyzed, I know that there is no way my opponent is going to either go for Spore or another Stun Spore, so I see this as a perfect opportunity to go into my Zangoose right here and take a little bit of damage in the process, but get my Toxic Boost to activate so that I can easily just go for the Facade on the following turn to do a really solid damage to pretty much anything on his team. Now unfortunately he does go out into his Crocodile, which is going to get off the Intimidate and actually take that really nicely, but I also do have the Close Combat on this Zangoose, but my opponent is also aware of that fact, so it decides to go out into the Amoonguss yet again to take this extremely well. As you're going to see, this does practically nothing, which actually reveals to me that this is definitely a max defense Amoonguss. But I obviously cannot stay in right here because I'm going to just go down very quickly, especially because toxic damage is slowly racking up. So I'm going to go out into my Weezing right here, and again, of all the things on my team that could get put to sleep, the Weezing is pretty much the one thing that I really don't care about if it does get put to sleep, so I'll let him do it if he feels like it, but I'm going to get off a burn in the process, which is really great for me, because since I knocked off this Amoonguss's Black Sludge, it no longer is gaining HP, and because I got the burn on it, it is now slowly losing HP each turn, which is really great because as you were seeing right now, this Amoonguss is just a pain in my butt. It just takes all the physical attacks from all my Pokemon. But I decided to go out into my Shiftry right here to pretty much either take Giga Drain or whatever you wanted to go for. And I actually go for the Fake Out as my opponent actually simultaneously also made a switch into his Charizard X, seeing my sleeping Weezing as a perfect opportunity to set up. But I know my opponent actually is probably going to expect me to switch out right there, so I'm actually going to go for the Knockoff first, and then go for a Sucker Punch on the following turn as he goes for the Brick Break, bringing me down to my Sash, which is really good, and because I obviously have the Sucker Punch, I'm going to want to go for it again, so I predict him to Dragon Dance, and he does exactly that as I take him out with another Knockoff, which was amazing for me because that Charizard X was going to be a huge problem if I could not get that out of the way. But my opponent is actually just going to go out into Weavile right here. Obviously, it also has priority in the form of Ice Shard, so he's going to go for that as well as Fake Out. And I'm just going to go back into my Hitmontop, get off another Intimidate, and actually take that Ice Shard fairly well, which is really good for me. But my opponent, again, still has this Amoonguss sitting around, which is just causing me so much issues. So I actually predict a switch right here as giving me a perfect opportunity to bring in this Weezing and burn a sleep, or a turn of sleep, which is going to be really good, because even though this was the least important thing on my team in the sense of being my perfect sleep fodder, I still would like to wake it up eventually so I could do some good damage with it with either Sludge Bomb or Thunderbolt, or maybe burn something else. But he decides to actually go out into his Goodra right there, and I obviously still have the Slowking sitting around to easily take any attack from this Goodra. So he's going to go for a Dragon Pulse and then go for a Thunderbolt on the following turn, but again, I can just slack off that damage, which puts me in a really good position right now on this current turn. So it gives me the opportunity to either go for a Toxic, go for a Scald, go for a Fire Blast. It really doesn't matter, so I decide to actually just go for the Toxic here. I figured that would be the best option overall. If he did go out into the Amoonguss, I still have the Fire Blast for it, so it's not that big of a deal. But he does go out into his Crocodile, and I was 100% sure he was going to Stealth Rock on this turn, and thankfully for me, I actually call that right, because that could have been really, really bad if he went for the knockoff right there. But thankfully, because I predicted that correctly, I'm actually able to take out this Crocodile, which is actually going to open up a door for my Zangoose to come in and potentially deal some really solid physical damage to anything on his team, because he no longer has anything with Intimidate. But he brings in his Weavile right here, and I know he's going to Fake Out, so I actually stay in yet again. I am making a lot of really, like, why would I stay in plays, but they're paying off because I'm actually predicting my opponent correctly. And right here is where he goes for the knockoff. Thankfully, I obviously switched out there, so I didn't take that with my Slowking, but my Weezing doesn't take that well either, which is very unfortunate, but I still have the Pain Split on it, so even though I no longer have Recovery, I still can potentially recover health with it, which will be very useful if I can get that to happen later on. But here I'm going to predict my opponent to predict my switch into Slowking, go out of my Jolteon, get the Volt Absorb, so I basically take no damage because it basically nullifies Stealth Rock, and then go for the Volt Switch on the following turn, which is actually going to give me a very, very safe switch out into my Slowking, because I know he's obviously not going to Thunderbolt yet again. Goes for the Dragon Pulse, and again, we're in the same exact situation where I can just pretty much slack off on anything he wants to do. So he goes for the Thunderbolt, does a pretty good chunk of damage as it has been doing, but it brings me down to a solid, 45 HP, which is still enough to slack off and then live potentially another hit. So now he's going to switch out yet again, because again, he can't really do anything to my Slowking, and I'm just going to go for the Scald this time in case he goes into Weavile, not really fearing being Toxic at all, but he doesn't, he just goes into his Amoonguss instead. But again, this is a really good matchup for me, because I actually do run a bit of speed on my Slowking, so I can outspeed Pokemon that are in roughly the same speed tier, such as Amoonguss. So I get off the Fire Blast, and as you saw, I did like a solid 60%, and then obviously with the burn bringing it down even lower, this is going to be a very, very solid 2-hit KO for me from this range. Thankfully, I don't get paralyzed, and thankfully he doesn't recover too much HP from the Giga Drain, because I obviously am ridiculously specially defensive, and I don't miss my Fire Blast, so I'm now taking out his second really frustrating wall on his team, thankfully because of my Slowking, which is really nice. But now this time, because I did stay in last time, I know he's obviously just going to go for an attacking move this time. He's not going to bother faking out, and as you saw right there, he knocked off as I just go into my Shiftry as basically death fodder. But I bring in my Jolteon right now, and Jolteon outspeeds Weavile. Thankfully, I have this on my team to do that, and I know he's probably just going to switch out right here, so I'm free to just Volt Switch, which is really good, and that will actually allow me to, again, Volt Switch back into a favorable matchup against this Goodra. Now, because I still have this Zangoose, and he no longer has any really solid physical wall on his team, I can just bring this thing in and go for the Facade, which is pretty much just going to take out anything he has left, which is really awesome. So I go for that, and it just one-shots his Zapdos, and you didn't even see that thing for the rest of the battle. And I brings me down to actually 19 damage after the poison, which is 1 HP higher than I need to live a Stealth Rock switch in, which is awesome. So I can technically bring that Zangoose in at another point in the battle and do some really good damage with it, which is something that is just really awesome. But I take this opportunity to switch out into my Hitmontop right here, get off the Intimidate for one last time, and then my opponent just goes for the Ice Shard again. I think I went for Sucker Punch there, but got fully paralyzed, which is very unfortunate. But the Life Orb is slowly wearing down my opponent, And so I decide to now go into wheezing, thinking I could live any hit from this Weavile now that I got the Intimidate off, and try to wake up, which thankfully I do, and I go for the Sludge Bomb, which still really doesn't do a lot of damage to Goodra, but I am now awake, and since his Amoonguss is gone, I don't have to be worried about getting put to sleep anymore. So again, bring in Slowking on the Goodra, can't really go wrong with that play at this point in the battle, and then I am going to proceed again to slack off to recover HP, and then on the following turn, since he no longer has his Amoonguss or really anything else that wants to be poisoned, I'm going to take this opportunity to just go for the Toxic right now, and if I have to, I will sit in here all day and slack off, or if I get paralyzed, I'll just switch out and get the Regenerator and then slack off again. So it doesn't really matter, this Goodra is definitely going to go down right now, and there's nothing he can do about it, but he actually switches out right here into his Weavile, as I unfortunately oh wait, sorry, I thought I got paralyzed that turn. As I switch out into my Wheezing, which unfortunately isn't really going to matter at this point because it's at this low range of health, so he's just going to knock off and take out my Wheezing. But again, he does have a very low HP Weavile now, where I actually feel very comfortable killing this with Volt Switch on the following turn. But because I don't want to take any more Life Orb recoil at this point, I actually just double switch right out into Slowking, knowing that he is going to go out into his Goodra, which is going to obviously give me the Regenerator and allow me to bring in my Slowking very safely on this Goodra, which now already is poisoned, so now I can just proceed to slack off as much as I want to, which is, again, really good. But because there's only a couple things left on my team, I know my opponent isn't really going to want to go for the Dragon Pulse to try and predict the Jolteon switch. So I know he just wants to take out the Slowking and is going to keep going for Thunderbolt. So I take this as the perfect opportunity to go out into my Jolteon right here to get the Volt Switch, which turns out to be one of the most key plays of this entire battle, because now I am at a pretty decent range of health to where I feel much more comfortable bringing in Jolteon to potentially live a priority attack from the Weavile, which you're going to see in a second comes into play very, very much so. So his Goodra is going to go down right here, and I am going to take this opportunity to actually switch out into Slowking first, just more or less as a way to guarantee I get more Life Orb damage on this Weavile, and just to kind of see if I'm able to maybe live a knockoff from this range of HP. I don't know why I thought I could have, but I'm just always curious as to how much damage some things are going to do. But who am I kidding? I get taken out very easily. Now my opponent is at an extremely low range of health, and because of that, I'm able to easily bring in my Jolteon and go for the Thunderbolt. Now my opponent obviously has the Ice Shard, and Ice Shard brings me down to 15 HP, and you saw I was Life Orbed, and because I am Life Orbed, I lose 10% of my HP every time attack, which leaves me with 1 HP, giving me the victory in this battle, which was absolutely insane, and one of the coolest things that has ever happened in a battle for me thus far. And this was only one of the 2 matches where this happened on the stream the other day. So I am definitely going to be uploading the other one very soon as well. But thank you, Blitz, for the battle. It was a ton of fun, and thank you everybody for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, take care, goodbye, and I will see you all next time.